come back home, we see them as from the diaspora coming back. And it's really defined who we are, because what you find is that I, in college, for example, had a bunch of Jamaican friends, and then they'll say something and I'm like, no, that is tree. That is, in a Ghanaian language. They're like, no way. Like Jamaicans have dokono. That's cake and tree. It's a kind of food. And then they were trying to tell me that Anansi is Jamaican. I'm like, what? But that shows you the connections that we have as a people. We're the same people. So it makes sense for us to find our heritage and return home. And so what was done in that essence was to have a symbolic return. The door of no return is how the slaves would leave Ghana and other countries and never come back. And we're now having the door of return and saying, come back home. This is home. Come back, because it makes sense for you as a person to find your heritage, but it also makes business sense. Let's be real about it. The continent really is right now the place to be in terms of having the resources and the people to make it happen. I'll stop here.
Okay. Let me jump in.
Yeah. I think that a lot of times people will say, well, why should I return to Africa? My family, my history, my ancestors have worked. They've spent a lot of time shedding blood, sweat, and tears to be here in America. Why should I return? I want to stay and be here and build here. And to that point, I often say, well, you have to think about the whole picture. We have to think about our ancestors, even the first ancestors that were forcibly taken away from the shores of Africa and brought to the U.S., to the Caribbean, to these various places in the diaspora. And we have to think about and honor what they would have wanted as well. And I think we owe it to them to at least return, to make the trip back, to connect to that source, and also honor our ancestors who worked and built here in the States and the various diasporas. And there should be that connection, and we should be able to make those roots without, saying that we're going to choose one or the other. There should be a connection between both places. And, I really appreciate that I can say that I was able to make it back as an African-American / Caribbean. I was able to make it back through the door of no return, which is now the door of return, in 2016, which was an amazing experience. And then 4 years later, or 3.5 years later, I actually brought more family members, almost 20-something family members and friends with me, including my 82-year-old grandmother. And, she told us a year before the year of return that before she closed her eyes, she was going to make it back to the continent of Africa, and that she was going to see it. And to be able to be there and stand with her in the slave dungeons was just a historic moment. 3 generations, me, my mom, and my grandmother. And so, that is significant to be able to say that we've made it back, and you should be able to honor that for your ancestors. So it's definitely something we should do to make it back to the continent.
All right. So Nia, I'll bring you in now briefly. When we talk about why Africa, of course, it all began, of course, from the slave trade era, of course, people leaving. Because think about it, every black person everywhere, talking about transnational mobility or transatlantic mobility. We're looking at people from the Caribbean, from South America. Every black person outside of the African continent is included in this sector. And now everything began from the shores of Africa. Everywhere you find yourself, they all began from there. So it's key for us to understand that, hey, this is where we are coming from. So it's not strange for us to find a way of resettling back to where we are actually coming from. Now, so beyond that, understanding that connection with the continent as a black person outside of the continent, the next thing you want to look at is what are some of the things that Africa has? Why somebody should even consider coming to Africa? And we'll talk about natural resources and human resources. So Nii, you want to touch on that piece when it comes to the human resources and the natural resources that Africa has, that any black person coming from Africa, from the diaspora, can actually utilize. Touch on that briefly.
Definitely, and I'll touch on it even in 2 ways. So the first is not just the idea of, what kind of resources are in Africa. One of the biggest resources that was actually extracted from Africa was not natural. It wasn't the gold, the silver, the diamonds. It was the people. There's this interesting quote that says, the slaveholders did not kidnap slaves. They kidnapped engineers, doctors, lawyers, pharmacists, literally the true resource that would have built Africa and should build Africa was what was taken out of Africa into the diaspora. And so it's an important point in saying, let these resources returning on their own terms, returning in their own time, by returning and helping to reshape Africa into what it really should be. It's a blessing that we have natural resources. And if we could actually have the correct human resources coming to support that, we'll see a lot more growth than we've seen. Now, when you talk about the services on the ground or the resources on the ground, Ghana, like any cosmopolitan country, I'll touch mainly on Ghana and a little bit on Nairobi, where I spent some time also. I have traveled within other countries, so I will touch on that also, but briefly, just because I am not an expert in other countries. But Ghana especially has a great resource when it comes to entrepreneurs, when it comes to medical professionals, legal professionals. And a lot of these individuals have created great companies, very small but great companies. And so there are lots of partnership opportunities with those who have similar skill sets looking to come back. When you talk about something like real estate, which at least I have a stronger grasp of, we are lagging behind in affordable housing, just from the perspective of housing stock. So having people with expertise in development, property development, property management, agency in itself is an area that a lot of people can tap into, both from the diaspora and locally.
So basically what we're saying is that Africa has all the natural and human resources that you can tap into if you're coming from the diaspora. So when you're thinking, why on earth should I think of resettling in Africa? Of course, from what Nee is telling you, that Africa has all the resources, both natural and human, that you can actually tap into and be part of, for the development of the continent. Now, I want you to touch on briefly the idea of the Continental Free Trade Agreement that Africa has now, which, of course, before now, trading among African countries is a lot more difficult. And with a free continental trade agreement, it's going to help us to ease all these borders. So what that means is that if somebody's coming from the diaspora, they have access to a bigger market that they can navigate through. Touch on that briefly as an advantage for why people should look at Africa.
Definitely. So one thing that, and I'll stay away from the technicals since this is a conversation. But one thing that, most diasporans have looked at when you look at Europe, when you look at the United States, is the ease in doing business across these continents. And that in itself is a huge opportunity, because what it does is it opens up your market from a mere 2 million in one state to, 200 million people. The free trade agreement is helping to build that same infrastructure in Africa, so that we stop looking at Africa as a silo of countries and look at it as one big continent that is interconnected and therefore can intertrade. The moment we are able to intertrade amongst ourselves and create easier structures for transportation, for interaction, interconnectivity, we start to see the true benefits in Africa's, treatment as one continent. Currently, if you wanted to fly from Ghana to Morocco, it would cost you more than flying from Ghana to the United States or flying from Ghana to Europe. And technically, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. And at the same time, the flight time would be the same as flying from maybe Miami to California, and that would barely cost you $400. So it's time we started looking at reshaping interconnectivity amongst the African countries. Start looking at them as states. Start looking at them as connected environments that allow for anyone coming in to see a bigger, broader market than a siloed, I'm working in Nigeria or I'm working in Ghana.
So, Nee, you touched on something which I think is key, the idea of people sometimes looking at Africa as one big country, which is a misconception. Now, I want us to quickly touch on some of these few things, because if somebody is ever going to consider relocating to Africa, let me share this. Yesterday, somebody sent us a message that she's been trying to come to Africa, of course, with her kids and all of that. And she listened to a podcast, and the podcast is talking about a lot of things contrary to some of the things that she's heard about Africa. And she's like, whoa, she's considering whether or not she wants to really do that. So I think we can take a few minutes to clear some of these misconceptions. Let's touch on them briefly. And one is what you mentioned. People think Africa is one giant country. And beyond that, they also look at the fact that, and everybody, you can take one once and done and touch on it. The idea that, Africans in Africa do not accept people coming from the diaspora, whether they're African Americans or Caribbean or whoever, they do not really accept it. Somebody can actually touch on that. And another thing that they talk about, of course, is the idea of, Africa being a dangerous place, a very dangerous place. But of course, when you look at even things that happens in America, Chicago and all of these places, and you look at Africa, a lot of the African continent, you can debate that. Then you look at things about poverty and hunger. We've heard it from years up until today. It's not current. Where you have all these hungry kids. Yes, $1 a day could help somebody in Africa. That's true. But that's not a bigger picture. Africa is way bigger than that. So you guys should touch on some of these things and clear the air, whether this is true. You have been to both. So let's have some clarity here.
Well, I'll start and say, yes, Africa is not one big country, and that clearly is a misconception. But Africa as a continent can be looked at as one big block and should be treated as one big block. We celebrate the differences in culture, the differences in language. But the moment we start thinking about ourselves as a united front and building wealth, building our futures, we should break down the barriers of you are Kenyan, you are Nigerian, you are Somali. We are not the same people, because we are. And so talking about the Black experience, talking about the African experience, I actually do not get as offended as I used to when people say, oh, you're from the country of Africa. And you also have to understand context, right? Because when others can say I'm from the United States of America, and you look at it as, 50 countries operating interconnectedly as one country, there's no reason why we can't look at Africa in that same way. And the moment we start having that psychological thought, it wouldn't be as harrowing. You touched on Africa being a dangerous place. And you have a lot of Ghanaians who will say, Nigeria, I'm never going there. It's so dangerous, right? All of these are parts of, a psychological block that stops us from exploring the rest of Africa and exploring opportunities in other parts of Africa. How many of us who live in Ghana have ever been to, Tanzania or Egypt? And it's about time we started making those trips and seeing these other states, or other countries, recognizing that there is true connection there. It's the same people. They may speak a different language, but this allows you to start trading in those other countries, trading amongst, ourselves in those ways to really open up the economic power.
Okay. So thank you. So any of you can also you want to touch on something?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest issues right now as far as the African American diaspora is, of course, police brutality and racism and all of those types of things. And when you sort of compare it in contrast to many negative things that are said about Africa, you hear about it being a dangerous and chaotic place. But in contrast, in reality, I feel like we as Black people are more at risk and more in danger in America than we will ever be living on the African continent. Just recently we talked about how, police officers in America versus police officers in Africa, and how a police officer in Africa their first thought would never be to touch their gun. Rather, their first thought may be to, it may be something around, okay, you've done something, I might fine you, or I might take some money from you because you've done something wrong. But it would never be to end a person's life or to reach for their gun. And so these are things that you would not have to worry about if you went to the African continent. And so I've had a lot of people say to me when I go, oh, be safe over there. But, I feel so safe and so at peace when I am walking in Ghana and when I'm there. And it's a certain, feeling of heaviness that is lifted off of me when I'm walking the streets of Africa. And I never get that when I'm here in America.
Okay. Cristobal, you want to touch on any of the misconceptions real quick?
Yes, I think the biggest misconception is ourselves. We don't tell the story. We don't tell a different story. I mean, I've been to 22 African countries, wow. But I dare say I don't know friends who've done same. And like I think Nee mentioned that you were from Ghana and we are living in Ghana and we're dying in Ghana. That is a big problem, because what happens also is that you appreciate the different cultures, you appreciate the different lifestyles. And you realize, like, I love Dakar. I think, Zanzibar will be my favorite just because I'm a beach girl. But I do. I mean, Dakar's like spirits and life is something else. Mm-hmm. Then you think you've seen it all. Then you go to Lagos and you're like, oh my God, there's the vibe here that is different. That it is a beautiful continent with such diversity. Mm-hmm. But the stories need to be told, and those stories need to be told by us. Let's be real. If you're going to wait for CNN and BBC to tell our story, then just keep waiting. They're doing a better job these days, but I think the onus is on us to break the misperceptions. So, look, we live in 3-story buildings, 10-story buildings. We live in huge houses, 5 bedrooms and all of it. It exists right here. We're living the life. Look, I was broker in the U.S. than I am now in Ghana. Let me just say it. Because I got caught up in the credit card world. Each one has its own positives and negatives, right? And yes, we do have a lot of development that we need to get to. But like you guys have said, walking down the streets of Accra in the night, I'm way safer than in New York City, much as I love New York City, mm-hmm. right? So we just need to be accepting to the differences and knowing that it will be when you come to any country in the continent from the U.S., think about it this way, you're traveling. So it's going to be different for sure, but it's not bad different. We don't live on trees, which is really sad that in 2020, people actually still think that,
yeah.
So let me just say it because some people will be like, okay, that's a little bit far-fetched, but people think it, right? And we drive. Look, I see cars here in Ghana that I don't necessarily see when I lived in Ohio. I will see it probably in California, and you will tell me, but not, necessarily here. And you think, oh my God, the latest car, and somebody bought it. Guess what? In cash.
Yes. So true.
Clean cash, by the way. So it's there is the positives to everything.
But go ahead.
Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Finish up.
Okay, just to wrap up, one piece I actually wanted to mention that I think I love the most is our sense of community.
Oh, yeah.
The West is very individual, and I generalize, right? So don't penalize me on this, but the setup of the U.S. is very individualistic, and that's how come within office settings. I work for the World Bank, so our headquarters is in Washington. In the hallways in Washington, it feels different than the hallways in Accra. And the difference really is in Accra, I say hi, I stop, I'm going to ask you about your goats and your sheep and your cow and your grandma and your cats and your dog. In the US, we're walking by and the hi I'm saying, I'm not even looking at you because I'm really in a hurry and I have to rush and go. So it's these pieces that just make it a beautiful, different experience. And I want everybody to visit any country on the continent you are. You have a different experience, but it's important to take it all in and appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. That's a great point. Now, so when we're looking at you making your way back to the African continent and resettling, whether you're going to do business or you're going to do back and forth, it's important that we build a strong foundation even before we actually find our way to the continent. And one of the things that a lot of people, especially those who don't have direct connection to the continent, like maybe my wife, like African Americans and Caribbeans and all of that, you want to begin to look at, to do some type of work on yourself, mind, body, soul type of work, spirituality. So DNA and things like that helps clarify some of the ways that you can begin to have a better contact with the continent even before you make a move. So you want to touch on that piece about you beginning to work on yourself as you want to transition to the African continent?
I do. I think it starts with curiosity. There's a curiosity that we must begin to have to be able to say, okay, I'm interested. I've made a decision that I now want to transition to Africa, relocate there. And I think that we have to clarify, okay, what is it that we want to do? What is it that we want to bring to the table, and understand, that we will be learning, that it's a learning experience. We will be learning from them. They will be learning from us, and that, there is room for us all to collaborate together. And I also think it is, important for us to define our goals of why we want to move. You just don't move and all of your aspirations and goals go out of the window because you've now left America and now you're in Ghana, whatever country. You should still think about, okay, what is the legacy and the impact that I want to leave? I think that's key, because if we're moving and we're not having impact, then what was the point of you even moving? Was it just to move there and, get off the face or the grid? We should go and define what our purpose is. And that will also help us when we're defining what we want to have as an impact. That will help us when there are struggles, because it's not going to be easy when you make the move. There's going to be cultural differences. There's going to be things that you have to learn. But if you know why you're there and you know what your purpose is and what you'll be contributing, that will always bring you back and center you.
So, in Africa, they say relationship is key, or networks. Who you know and who knows you is very important when it comes to Africa. So between you and Crystal, I wanted to touch on the idea of building strong networks and building relationships, even before you think of making your way to the continent, as a strong foundation. And I know what you guys do with Crystal, you do, and of course, I know you're part of the board of Diaspora, where the focus is bringing people who are coming back from the diaspora together. Okay, because I believe you, and one thing I read, you can actually do this even before you make your way to the continent, which is very key. So touch on building relationships and networks as a foundation as you think about relocating or, resettling in Africa.
So I'll start, and I love having this conversation with Nee, because he was there from the beginning, and he was the one who was like, "Stop making this thing sound like an NGO."
Christabel, the knee we are too. So say the knee on the top right corner.
Just say knee should be.
Sorry about that. But no, I'll just say that because we come from different perspectives. I'm a development girl. I'm a nonprofit type of person, so I think about this return and networks quite differently than me does with the let's go make some money, which is great, right? So I was just starting off with that. But yes, what we do at Diaspora is we are a network of young professionals who return home to Ghana. It's primarily in Ghana now. Hopefully over time, the movement goes across the continent. But the idea of Diaspora is basically saying we're home from the diaspora, and we're a support system to help you navigate. In any new country, you're going to find that it's difficult to figure it out. And particularly on our side of the world, as you will know, a lot of our history is oral. We're naturally oral people. We don't write as much. And so navigating the system is not, I entered the US and within a week, I could figure out how to get a driver's license, a credit card, all of it, because I just click on the button somewhere on the internet and I can read it all. We're getting there. But that doesn't actually cut it. It's the people that, again, I think I mentioned this before, because we're very communal. So it's important that you know people and are able to navigate the system. So what we provide is a platform where you don't have to wait to come to Ghana first. You can join and realize that there's like-minded people, because this is something we found when we came home, is that if you don't have a support system, you get burnt out quickly because it's just different, right? And so this is what we offer to people. Now, I want to just say, as we're breaking misperceptions, I don't think it's an African thing, the network thing. We just do it differently. Because in the US also, it's a very culture. Think about it. If you go to New York, look at what the Jews are doing. It's because they know each other. They're taking over a certain market. And you find, that's just an example, but you find that in different ways. And so to say that it's important to note that like anywhere else, who because it's a different culture, will help you a lot. And we're here to help you with that. So I'll turn over to Nee to add.
Yes, the Diaspora journey is one Christopher and I really enjoy, and we continue to share many laughs about that. But I think one key thing that has made us effective is the idea or recognition that we were in your shoes at some point. So even though we grew up in Ghana, where Hasbro began, we left and spent close to 10 years outside of Ghana. And in coming back, we recognized that, our friends had grown in different directions. Some relationships we had before we left had morphed into strangerships and other, circumstances. And so it became necessary to find the right kind of people who share those experiences that you've had, who you can connect with on a more deeper support-based level. And that's what a Hasbro has become. So, one of the things I struggled with after my first year, and this is because I moved back to Ghana with a very hard landing. I moved back and started a company right away. And it was just being able to navigate some of the steps in getting that company registered. And what I found helpful was being able to call other friends who had moved back maybe 2 years before me, and them guiding my steps in how to navigate, getting things done. Unfortunately, and we like to say it's an Africa problem, but everywhere you go, you do pay bribes one way or another, right? But even the idea of how do I show appreciation? How do I navigate incentivizing people to do the things I need done? We call it lobbying here, we call it bribery in Africa, right? But even the idea of how to get around and get things done became something that my network was able to help me achieve. And so Hasbro by itself is a huge network of different professionals. So, in getting your company registered and finding a doctor and finding a property where you're going to live, all these things are resources that exist in a Hasbro because our members have been with us and essentially been vetted over the years by working with each other. So we've created our own community, and it's not an exclusive community outside of the rest of Ghana. It's an interactive community, but it allows us the strength and numbers and resources that we need to make effective change.
Okay, so before I jump on, so we're supposed to have two other panelists supposed to join us, but they're having a technical challenge. So if Ronell or Beverly can actually assist to get them on, because we can't on our end. So Mr. Peter is supposed to join us, and Nana from Ghana is supposed to join us. So they're still working out to try and join us as we make progress, because we are not able to do that. So yeah, so Mr. Peter will be jumping on it if he's able to get it sorted out. He has a lot of data and information on what we're doing. So yes. So now talking about, the foundation piece, I think one of the key things that we talked about backstage some days before was about people visiting. Okay, so a lot of people want to make a move to Ghana. They want to relocate or even go to do business, and randomly they get up, they want to pack their bags and go. Some people can do that. If you have a lot of faith, you can do that. But usually it's good for you to actually visit. And as you visit, it helps with even the relationship building process as well. Now, there's an example of a guy in Ethiopia. He's African. He's not African American. He's African, but was born in Europe and lived in America, or grew up in America. And this gentleman wanted to go back to the continent to build something in IT. The company is called Gebeya. You can look them up. It's an IT company that trains people. So what he did was he first decided to visit, although he had connection to Nigeria, but he decided to visit, go around just like Cristobal, travel around the continent to almost every country in Africa as best as he could. And what he did was he was trying to find where he could best match what he's able to do to what is needed in that country. And eventually, after traveling around, he chose Ethiopia. So the key thing is that people have to try and take a visit, at least not just to one country, but try different places and see where your goals can best align. And then, of course, you can now initiate that process of actually moving to resettle. So it's very key, the visiting piece, that people understand that. Now, that will take us into the next thing we want to look about. Now, when you want to resettle in Africa, there are a lot of paperwork or documentations that are involved in the process of wanting to make your way back to Africa. So we have some of them on the screen, but we'll touch on just a handful of things that I want you guys to look at. Now, people who come to Africa, of course, like to talk about things that has to do with residence permit, citizenship, and stuff like that. So I want you guys to touch on it. What is it like in terms of, is there a clear path to citizenship, or somebody from the diaspora who has no connection to a particular country being able to easily warm up into the place in terms of the processes to follow to make that happen? I think that's very key, and that's one of the challenging things that a lot of people ask a lot of. So you can use a country as a case study. That's still fine. So anybody can jump on real quick so we can beat the time. Yeah.
Sure. Let me just pick on the end of the visiting part. It's not only important to visit, but don't only visit during the holidays. For example, if you come to Ghana at Christmas, it's quite different than when you show up in August. And in August is probably when you have the real look at what Ghana is like, because we have the rains, everything is slowed down. People are just like working. At Christmas, we all shut down for a month and we're partying. This is just what we do. And so that's also a different dynamic in terms of the visit. So be goal oriented in terms of why is it that you want to come, and then try and do different times of the year to be able to figure it out properly. And then you may also say, no, it's okay, I'm not going to do this country because it's X or Y, which is, as we said, there's different places. Now, to respond to the question around things like citizenship, it's a complete it depends response, because different countries are working on it differently. So, for example, even to get visas, to Rwanda, I know you can get visa upon arrival, any country, well, I'll say almost any country of the world. This is not necessarily the case in other parts. I remember being in New York, and as a Ghanaian going to Zambia, I actually needed a visa. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, why would I need a visa to Zambia? I'm a Ghanaian, I'm using a Ghanaian passport, but this is what it's like. So what I'll ask people to do actually is to research on the countries prior and give yourself time to go through the visa application process. In Ghana, because of the year of return and this particular government's big contribution towards connecting with the diaspora, they've done some things differently. So last year, I think it was about 200 people were granted citizenship automatically based on them filling out a form and demonstrating that they've lived here a certain amount of time and contributing to the society. But it's not common, and 200 is nothing out of the number of people that I know who are in Ghana through the African American Association of Ghana. So I don't want to give people a particular answer, because then they may try it in, say in Mali and find something different. What I will suggest to you is to talk to people from the country. Do research like you were looking for a school in the US, for example, right? It's a vast world. So you need to do some research and figure it out. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, so I do think it is important for us to realize if we are relocating, many people want to look into, they want to have their citizenship prior to moving. And what I want to say is, it's just not that. It's a process, but oftentimes it's not as simple as that. Like Christabel said, there were many people who were granted citizenship last year in Ghana that had lived there for over 20-something years. They had demonstrated, they had integrated into culture, they had made contributions, and they've done all of these different things. So I don't want people to feel like the citizenship has to be a condition in order for them to move and relocate back to the continent. Sometimes it's just not that way. We're working, and I do truly believe that we as African Americans and Caribbean people of Caribbean descent and other people in diaspora who do not have a direct connection, they should be able to have an easier access and process to citizenship. But until that point, I don't feel like that should hold us back from making it to the continent at all. Okay.
Nee, you want to jump on before I move to the next thing real quick?
All I would add to that is there are different visas. So it's not just a matter of, getting citizenship. There are working visas, right of abode visas and other visas that allow you, a particular period of time to stay in a place like Ghana, work, live, go through all the rigmarole of any normal lifestyle like you would in the US. The green card process is a 10-year process in itself, right?
Okay.
And so it's not just about having the actual Ghanaian citizenship. There are other ways you can work and stay in Ghana and contribute to Ghana.
Definitely.
And so, that should not be a limitation.
So I want you guys to quickly touch on this next subject. Well, if somebody wants to come to Africa, either to live permanently or to do business, renting us against building, okay? And touch on that in relation to access to lands and what it takes to own lands in that respect. We'll use Ghana. A lot of us are Ghanaians here, so we'll use Ghana maybe as a case study. But I know it's similar in several other African countries. So you want to touch on that, renting us against building. And take into consideration people who have time to actually plan, because I have my own bias, which I'll share. So just touch on it briefly so we can beat the time, just as much as you can. Yeah, go ahead.
So when you say renting versus building, there's a huge gap in there. There's renting, there's buying, and then there's building.
Okay.
That's true. So, yes.
But what I would say is that it really is a matter of choice and finances. For anyone who is first moving, I would say treat it like you're moving to any other country. Don't treat it like, Africa is some magical continent or something different. And so to share a small private story, my mother-in-law decided to move to Hawaii. And so what she did is for the first year, she rented and spent the time to visit different parts of Hawaii and kind of settle on where she would like to buy and live. And so, I don't think it's a question of versus. I think it's, when you land in Ghana, think about renting for a period of time, identify with the right places you would want to live before you make that final move. Now, if the question is buying versus building, personally, I love to build because I love to customize. And thankfully, a place like Ghana and Africa, for the most part, allows you to do that just because of the systems around real estate development. Those are changing rapidly because we have a huge shortage in housing, which is why prices are also that high. It's a demand-supply issue. And what we are going to see happen is, and I think this started maybe 5 or 8 years ago, but the government, through the Ghana Real Estate Developers Association, gave certain concessions for more real estate development companies to come on board and help to create more housing stock. And so you are seeing a lot of gated communities come up, a lot of apartment buildings come up. And these are very well built and follow strict guidelines for mass housing. So there's no reason to think about having to build. But if you are in a financial position and you care about customization, there are lots of options to allow you to build. As a foreigner, you are only allowed a 50-year lease, which of course is renewable. We've had questions around what happens if the landowner decides to take it back. And people try to treat it like an African problem. But I believe either in Malaysia or Singapore, foreigners are not allowed to own land either. It's a 5-year leasehold, and after that you renegotiate.
Okay.
So these are not outlandish laws. They're just there to help ensure.
But okay. So a quick one, Christopher. Just this one will go to you now. Somebody once asked me that now if in Ghana, for instance, if I can't own land outright as an African American woman, now what happens after the 50 years if I buy the land and I build my house on it? What happens to me? Is that wise, or I should just keep renting? Because if I build a house on a land that I don't own outright, and in 50 years' time somebody else has it technically, why should I want to build? What's your take on that, briefly?
Personally, I would say that 50 years, first of all, is a long time. So I would not want to spend the money on rent because it adds up and it's not for you. And, so if you have the opportunity any day, I would say buy, build before rent.
Okay.
It's not that difficult to renew. For the most part, people are quite flexible with renewing that options. And we have very good lawyers who understand the land tenure system. And I actually want to say this. The issue is not when the 50 years is up. The issue is ensuring that when you're first buying it, that the land is yours. And that's where we have quite a bit of challenges, because we have a system where there's the stools that, are caretakers of the lands, and some people can be shady around it. So one thing that I would advise to everybody is that if you're going to buy land in Ghana, be sure to make sure that I invest in a lawyer. That's all I'll say. Okay. Because you may see it as a price thing, but it will save you a whole lot of issues. Because what you don't want is, as you're living in the house 6 years later, to find out that the land actually belongs to somebody else, and then have to go through all that litigation. So don't worry too much about the 50 years, because 50 years you'll sort yourself out. Worry about the onset to make sure you get it right.
All right.
Definitely.
So now let's quickly look at the cultural piece of Africa. Now, a lot of people want to make their way to Africa, but again, they ignore ingraining themselves in the African culture. I mean, if you want to go to a place, it's only prudent that you try to embrace the culture and see how best you can assimilate or learn how the people do things and stuff like that. Now, I want you guys to talk about the idea of people building native, friendships. I call it native friendships, and you will talk about this, building native friendships in that respect, and not trying to isolate yourself as a diasporan who is coming to the continent and just want to be, okay, I want to just be myself and people who are also coming from the diaspora, but not really engaging with society. So not just the relationships, touch on also people learning the cultures. For in some cases, even the language. Because if you come to Ghana, you learn a few local language. And Caucasians are very good at that. When they come even to Africa, they like to pick up a few things. Like, in Ghana, Akwaba, Eteseng. It's just nice. It helps with the connection between the diaspora and Africa. So I want you guys to touch on the importance of that cultural aspect of people who want to resettle in Africa. Dive into that.
So I'll take the language piece. I think even before my first time of visiting, that's something that I wanted to do. I didn't want to come to Ghana and feel like I was trying to bring the West to Ghana. I'm coming to Ghana because I want to immerse myself, and I wanted to learn the culture, and I wanted to learn the language. So I even started practicing Tree before I went. And when I actually got to Ghana, I had a teacher that would come and teach me twice a week, and I was practicing with some of the people that I was working with. And when I tell you that changed the dynamics of my interaction with them, I was more well received. They were more willing to talk to me about different things. We had a lot of interesting conversations, and it just opens up your ability to be able to learn about the culture. Because I think that's something that people always complain about. I'm moving. I don't know about the African culture. How do I understand something that I've never been a part of? Well, it starts with, you being open to learning about the culture, and language is a great gateway for you to be able to do that.
Okay. So, Cristobal, you can touch on it, or any of you can touch on it.
My take on it is do exactly the same thing that you do when you're going to any other country, because you have to adapt and be versatile, those two things. Mm-hmm. So it's always a plus when you can speak to the taxi driver. And they smile. Look, Ghanaians love foreigners, especially when they know you're a foreigner. They open up. So you won't necessarily have a problem if you don't know, but it's always a plus when you do. Particularly so that you can navigate those unwritten rules as you go. The worst thing in life, look, and it's happened to me as a Ghanaian in Ghana, because people thought I couldn't speak my local language. The worst thing in life is when somebody says something and you don't understand. It's just not fun, right? So my suggestion to you guys is, and we like to see people making an effort, so make an effort in either way before, as you're coming. But don't feel like that is a barrier. It is not at all. I mean, a lot of people speak English in Ghana and across the continent, and French in other countries also. So if you have these two languages, you will navigate just fine. Look, there's languages in Ghana I cannot speak. I went to school. I actually did Ga. But Neil would start speaking Ga right now, and I'm looking at the two knees actually, and I'm just like, what? I have no idea. I just know some lines. So let's not make it as big of a deal as it's not a big deal. It's really what I'm saying.
Nee, you want to touch on native friendships, engagement?
Yes, and what I'll say is, culture is nuanced, and there's only so much of it you can learn from, a book or online or even YouTube before you get to the continent. And so if you've made the decision to fly all the way there, put yourself in the mindset of I am here to explore. Mm-hmm. And that exploration starts with getting to know the people, getting to understand the people you are meeting there. Once you start doing that and having good conversation and building, realistic, solid relationships, your navigation of culture becomes easy also. If you met me as a stranger, if you met me in Ghana and we had a good conversation and became friends, the next time I'm going for a festival in my town or in my village, I will take you along and I'll tell you how to greet the elders. I would show you, what kind of handshake you should be performing along the way. So the idea of even immersing in culture and learning about culture starts from building relationships with people that are there and that share certain commonalities. So I'm not saying, get there and make friends off the street, but the moment you can find people you share certain commonalities with who can help you navigate how things are on the ground, it makes your life a whole lot easier and you get to avoid a lot of missteps. Okay. And again, this is, these are the same strategies we use when we moved from Africa here to the US. So this is not unique to Africa. If you wanted to really navigate New York, you would have to find a New Yorker to help you figure out where the best, goat roti is, which is Jamaican, the best fufu is, So consider those same skill sets in navigating and move to Africa.
Okay, so now when you think about coming to Africa again, whether to live permanently or of course to do business or to even visit and go back and forth, I mean, the idea of business is always very key. Now, we tell people in our company, Certified Africa, that look, when you come to Africa, don't come to Africa just to have fun. But whilst you're having fun, open your eyes to the opportunities around and see what you can actually capture and be part of. Now, we want to dive into the idea of doing business in Africa. And I'll ask a simple question that will help us to zoom into that. The idea of somebody who's coming, should they think about getting employed? And you guys did justice to the idea of the rent versus the buying and very well. So I know you can do same, you can build upon this one. The idea of, getting employed or starting your own business. It can be very tricky for most people who are making their way to the continent. So let me hear your perspectives on that. Starting your own business when you're coming to the continent or, joining somebody else's thing that they've already built. What's your take on it?
I'm going to take you right back to the beginning where we started off by saying that you need a goal and you need a mindset to decide how to come. And the reason why I'm doing that is to say my story is that January 1st, 2010, I said I'm coming home by the end of December 31. I'm not a risk taker. And so I was coming home with a job. So much as I had set forth a timeline for me to leave, I actively started looking for jobs. So that's my story because first of all, I'm not, I don't think I will ever run a business that is my own. Be an entrepreneur, although I'm told I'm an entrepreneur on what I'm doing in a hospital, fine. Mm-hmm. But, real life, that's all I do. It's just not me. I'm more comfortable in the system of the 9 to 5 and all of that. Maybe at some point I'll change. But that's my story. So I think what I'm saying to people is, what is your story? And make it your story because others will, Nee told you that he jumped right in. Nishipi told you he jumped right in. And started his own business and did well, right? And others have done it. My brother did the same. Came from Vanderbilt and started a computer engineering firm that is still running and doing very well. So there isn't, I don't want to advise anybody to do one or the other. One thing I'll tell you though is that a lot of things that you do on this side of the world are going to be new. So that gives you an opportunity if you are entrepreneurial minded, that it's a good space to do that. But that being said, make sure you have capital coming in because Accra, for example, is a super expensive city. So if you don't have the capital coming in and you're coming to a new place, you're going to take all of the stress that comes in to move into a new place. and then you're going to start your own business, you don't know anybody, think about the implications of that. So think partnerships, create your own story, and either or is just fine.
Okay, that makes sense. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to say there are a lot of people who want to leave. I definitely respect that. There are people who are going to want to stay in the 9 to 5, but there are some others who want to leave that lifestyle, and they want to leave that behind when they come to Ghana. And that's one thing that, Africa, Ghana, some of the other African countries as well. And, one of the things that we've been super passionate about is helping those from the diaspora that want to come and start businesses, giving them that support and that help in identifying business opportunities and areas, and, just exposing people to all of the opportunities. Because the reality is that there are other foreigners from Asia, from Europe, from all of these other places who are coming in and surveying Ghana and other African countries for business. And they're doing well and they're making a lot of money. And with or without us, the African continent will develop. So we have to ask ourselves as a part of the diaspora, are we going to contribute to that development by starting businesses, or are we going to allow foreigners to come in and start businesses? And sometimes I get pushback because people say, oh, well, I don't want to come to Ghana or another African country and be like a colonizer, or I don't want to bring capitalism. Well, the reality is that it's going to happen. And we as Black people cannot be colonizers of our own country. So we have to figure out where we can bring our skill set and the things that we're passionate about and how we can contribute to the continent. And if it's starting a business, we should do that.
Just add something little to that. I always have this scenario where I say, imagine a time in Africa, in the history or in the life of Africa, where, of course, the power companies are owned by people who do not look like me, where the water companies are owned by people who do not look like me, because people who look like me maybe want to be employed there. There's nothing wrong with that, absolutely. But we need to have people who are willing to be able to have ownership in these things. Because imagine this happens to us, where somebody determines when we have water, and it's happening in some other African countries actually already, but I don't want to go into that. When we do this, when we do that, I think that would be a disaster. So for most people who are in the position to be able to build something like needed on the continent, it's a great thing. I think people should take up on it and not just give up on it because they're coming to Africa, so they just want to find something they can do. I think it's very important. And the reason why, one of the reasons why we show people some opportunities is that I've realized that you can have a lot of plans in mind of what you think will be good for the continent. But once you get on ground, there's a lot of things that you realize that what you were thinking is not realistic. So you need to now have a lot of different things that you had access to before. So that's also very key. People should be open-minded that, okay, I can come with this idea, but it may not work in Ghana, it may not work in Nigeria, it may not work so I need to be able to be dynamic and adapt. So I think that's very key. So Nii, you can jump in real quick.
I would add that it also depends on your stage in life.
True.
If you spent multiple years as an entrepreneur in Europe or the diaspora, your take on expanding your business into Africa would be a little different than a recent graduate who's looking to move back to Africa. I would say from my personal experience, I do not regret it at all, and it was just at a fork in the road, and I took one path versus the other. But one thing I wish I had looked into was being employed locally to help navigate relationships and the business culture before I set out on my own. I touched a bit on lobbying versus bribery, and I don't want to put it in a negative light per se, but there are times when I went into certain offices and had the same conversation day after day for a whole month because it was in my calendar. You need to go see this person and get this thing done. And, on day 32 and being frustrated and venting to somebody, they said, did you ever give them any, did you ever buy them lunch? Did you ever give them, anything? And I said, no, why would I? Like, it's their job. They were like, okay, just go back and take a pack of takeaway to the receptionist. Just say, hey, on my way here, I stopped to get lunch and thought I'd get you something. And the day I did that, the next day she called me and said, oh, I spoke to, the manager, your paperwork will be ready by Friday. And so it's understanding the nuance. And some of these things, are unfortunate, but they exist everywhere. And it's really just being able to understand how to navigate them in our context. So I do believe that there is something like a soft landing, where maybe by being employed, you get a softer way to explore and get comfortable with the area, whilst you keep an eye on your bigger goal of setting up your own venture. So it works to balance that.
Let's touch on briefly some opportunities, and let's tie that to what we're involved, some of the things we're involved with. And for Christabel, of course, you may not have maybe a business or anything, but there are a lot of areas that you've seen that you can mention briefly in terms of people who are thinking about coming to do business in Africa. Now, Mr. Peter was supposed to join. Of course, if you look at the slide I have here, HBCU Africa collaboration with Land Capital International Limited, Kenya. They're building a whole, like a community that is going to be interconnected, that deals with a lot of the SDG goals and how they can facilitate that with the diaspora and people, of course, in Kenya and other parts of Africa to make these SDG goals a reality on the continent. So people can reach out to Mr. Peter. I think I'll try and see if I can put his email in the chat box. So if Mr. Peter is watching this, he can put his information in the chat box so people can reach out and then have a conversation in relation to that. So let's talk about some few opportunities. So Ni, you are into real estate. So touch on that area and some of the opportunities over there and one or two other areas. Then Christopher, you do some and we'll touch on a few and then we could take some questions if there are any. Go ahead.
The beautiful thing about Africa is, as old as it is as a continent, it's still quite young and there's still a lot of opportunities. I've mentioned twice about the lack of housing stock, and what you would hear is a lot of people talk about how expensive it is to find housing in Africa. It's a supply-demand thing. As long as you don't have enough supply, pricing would go up. So and some of the statistics about just, Africa having the youngest population and stuff like that mean that as time goes on, we will need more housing. There are huge tracts of land that are just ready for development. And so opportunities are abound in building communities, in building multifamily buildings, and building the commercial and retail services to support these communities. So just from that perspective, there are lots of opportunities. We've seen a certain glut in extractive services recently, oil prices falling and what that has done to some companies, the same with gold and other precious metals. But all of those opportunities exist for both business and investment. Agriculture is a big one, and we have the largest tracts of arable land. So there's so many ways to come in and have your personal twist on that. About 10 years ago, we were involved with two gentlemen who started an aquaponics farm, and this was supposed to provide more organic and healthier ways to build your produce. And they were, I think they were producing. Don't quote me on the numbers, but a large amount of produce using a very small amount of land. But we have tracts and acres and hectares of land that allow for these kind of opportunities to be tapped into. So technically, anything that you have a strong grasp on, you can find an opportunity in Africa.
Okay, so Christabel, you want to
take off? To take off from where Nee left. Not just agriculture, but agribusiness. The whole value chain of agriculture has a lot of opportunity, and particularly in processing. We're not doing even, 1/100th of the processing that we should be doing. And so that's an area that if you have capital, think of the different ways to do processing. That is an open field in so many different angles. Another big piece, I mean, we're living in a COVID world, right? Is technology. Technology, there's, from so many different aspects. Like we mentioned a few times on this call, is that, a lot of things are new. A lot of things are under development. And so if you come in and you have a technology mindset, it can help whatever business it is you decide to do, or if you actually want to be a technology person, like working in information technology, there's all these different angles there. Investment banking is huge. People are looking for investors. Governments are looking for investors. And then I also tell people that take a look at the time you're in. Right now, healthcare research is going to be big. If people are in that industry, this is a time to really, and I don't even think just on the continent, globally, right? But bring in your new and innovative ideas, and I think you should be good. I'm a development worker, so I have to go in that direction. There is a whole lot of areas within international development that are prime because, as I said, the continent is developing. So from child security to food security to, impact evaluations, monitoring, all of those areas are places where you can come in and make money. One plug I would like to make for those who will do, 9-to-5 type jobs or even consultant services with big firms is to do a lot of the research coming from outside and make sure that you navigate the system. You discuss things like your compensation prior to coming in. Because a lot of the times when you have those conversations with particularly international firms, when you're outside, you're able to get better compensation than if you wait till you come in and you're trying to, get pretty much the same job. So that's one tip for those who are looking for a job to do. Thank you.
Okay. So here's what I always tell people, that Africa, of course, is full of opportunities from the day you land on the continent, all over the place. So when you're coming, one of the first things that you look at is you yourself. What are you capable of doing? What are you capable of doing? Because I bet you that thing that you're capable of doing very well, Africa has a need for it. So all you need to do is to identify that space and where that space is, and then you can begin to fill it. So that's your first step into coming in, what you yourself personally can do. And then, of course, you now begin to look at some of the areas that they've actually touched on. And I tell people a lot, if you look at Agenda 2063 of the African Union, the Africa we want by 2063, and of course in 2030, and then that SDG goes, those things give you ideas of places or areas that Africa could use a lot of help at. So when you begin to look at those areas, whether it's oil and gas, whether it is power, whether it is infrastructure, whether it is education, whether it is real estate, whether it is tourism, you begin to look at these things and say, okay, which of these spaces can I actually fill? Then you begin to make progress. Of course, you need to do your research and then get help. That's the final thing, get help. Never think that you can walk into Africa and then whether you're relocating fully or you're doing business, never think that you can do it on your own. And that takes me to the part where you need to find who can give you that help. Of course, you have groups like the HBCU Africa group or the African Diaspora Nation that is more like a family that you can tap into. When it comes to any angle that you want to go, they can be able to connect you to resources. And platforms like this also enables you to be able to have that type of relationship building in whatever you're trying to do. So they also have some type of funds that I think is important. Okay, they call it the African Diaspora Resettlement Fund that you can actually tap into depending on what you're trying to do or build on the continent. So you want to reach out to the HBCU Africa group or the African Diaspora Nation and then get that type of help. When it comes to resettlement, support services, they can also help you with that in terms of your transitioning, whether it's for business, whether it's for living there full time, whatever it is, they can help you. Of course, a diaspora, like they've said, is a big community that you can be part of, meet other like-minded people who are also doing amazing things on the continent. And it makes your life a lot more easier when you're making your way to the African continent. And of course, one thing I'll say is that when you select a country that you're going to, you begin to do research and see who is there, who are the stakeholders in that country that I can actually begin to connect with and build relationships. Because we said earlier, in Africa, it's all about relationship. Sometimes you don't need anything from Google. I'm telling you, when you have the relationships and the networks, all your answers are over there. All the Google answers you're looking for are with these people. You just need to get in touch with them, and you do very fine. And this, I bet you, helps your relocation process a lot easier. And just to touch on, of course, Certified Africa, what we do as well, we're also supporting or putting in the efforts to reconnect the diaspora back to Africa, whether to live there permanently or to do business. So find a lot of institutions or companies like ourselves, Certified Africa, that can help you make that transition a lot more easier instead of having to go on a tangent trying to find answers. Okay, now we'd like to thank the African Diaspora Nation for this, opportunity to just, have this conversation. It's good. We need more platforms like this to keep sharing the story. Like Cristobal said, we need to take the message out there. And yesterday I made a comment on the student panel that, look, we need to take this back to our homes in America or wherever, the Caribbean. We need to take it to our homes and not just have these conversations online and then leave it at that. So let's keep reaching out. So we thank the African Diaspora Nation. We thank Cristobal for joining this panel. We thank Nishipi, just to specify, because I'm also Ni, for joining this amazing panel. And then for myself and my beautiful wife, Cristobal, you're beautiful. So don't get me wrong. Okay. So we're grateful to you all for joining.
It's
Mr. Peter, Mr. Peter, we're so sorry you couldn't join. Let me just do a quick read of Mr. Peter's profile. Mr. Peter is an entrepreneur, he's a change agent, he's an advocate for African Diaspora Return Initiative. He's currently co-founder and CEO of Nishati Coffee, a startup company that has partnered with Africa Diaspora Nation to promote HBCU Africa Homecoming Legacy initiatives in Africa. So we've put Mr. Peter's contact information. He had a lot of technical difficulties. He couldn't join us. He, in fact, built a lot of the presentation that we have today. He contributed a lot in building that together. So just so you know that we appreciate you, Mr. Peter. We're so sorry that you couldn't join this panel. We're so sorry. So, any last words? I think we have 2 minutes. Any last words before we join the main stage? Any question? I don't see any question in the chat. So if you all want to say anything before we jump off, a hasbro or anything, you can just.
All I'll say is that if you're thinking about it, don't overthink it. Just do it. Come. You'll make your own story. You'll bump a little bit, but that's okay. You will still make it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nee, you were going to say.
I just add that in the spirit of the key, the key stakeholders of this panel, the HBCUs are a great resource. And once you've been to an HBCU, or if you're currently in one of these universities, take advantage of the relationships with Africans and others there. Personally, some of my best friends from other African countries, and as sad as it is, before coming to Howard, I had been to so many European countries, but I'd never been to any African country, well, except for Togo. And so it was through my relationships there, making friends from Senegal, from Kenya, from Nigeria, from Tanzania, that actually became the catalyst for me visiting these countries. And so be sure to take advantage of these relationships and these other people from other countries that you are coming into contact with in the universities or in your alumni networks.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's keep the conversation going. So you can join the main stage. There's a lot happening there. Let's go join and then keep this conversation going. So we appreciate you all. God bless.
Thank you so much.
If you want to put your contact information in the chat, any of our panelists, please do so.
Yeah, real quick before we jump off. So you can put your emails in the chat real quick.
And both of us can be reached at info@hasbro.
Okay. All right. So all right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. So sorry, I have an unexpected guest and we'll have to catch the replay of this. All right. So we appreciate you all who joined this platform. So it was an event that we had, but we decided to still come live and then share what we're talking about with other panelists over here. So basically, that was it. It just ended. We appreciate you. It was the HBCU Africa, event that they put together by the African Diaspora Nation. So thank you. Good to have you. I don't see any question here that we need to answer. Okay, somebody said, D. Wellington, I'm relocating there soon. That's beautiful. Good to know. Good to know. All the best. If you need any support or help, you can reach out to Certified Africa, and we'll help you do that. Now, today at 4:30, we'll still come on live. We'll still come on live, and then of course talk about our usual Africa Fridays. Africa Fridays. We're bringing you the do's and don'ts when it comes to Africa. We're doing the do's and don'ts. So just join us. All right. Thank you so much, Kendra Parker. We appreciate you for joining and for sticking and staying. We're coming again on 4:30 to deal with Africa Fridays, Africa Certified Fridays, or Certified Africa Fridays. Anyhow you put it. We'll see you then. All the best. Bye.